Okay, now I'm delighted to introduce Professor Ryo Sahashi of the University of Tokyo. If you have spent some extended period in Japan in the past few years, you may have seen him on TV. He appears on the equivalent of the Meet the Press Sunday morning debate show on NHK frequently. He's a rising star in international relations, leading figure in talking about Japan's foreign policies, relationships among the United States, Japan, China, Taiwan, all the other actors in the Pacific area. He can talk about bilateral, trilateral, multilateral, any lateral relationships among those countries. So we are very privileged to have him here today. He has published widely on those topics relating to international relations in East Asia and the broader Pacific region. He, as I said, appears on TVs and media outlets, writes on those issues in Asahi, Yomiuri, Mainichi, all these newspapers. Okay. And he's here today to talk about the China-Japan-U.S. trilateral relationship on the East Asian order. Okay. So please join me in welcoming Professor Sahashi.
Thank you, Kyo, for kind introduction. So mic is on, all right? Yeah. So my name is Ryo Sahashi. I'm now working in University of Tokyo. This is my first visit to Anaba. The first visit was actually over 20 years ago. That time I was a student of UIUC, Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. So after that, I come down here again and again, especially for Ford Library, Presidential Library, and also to meet my friend and professor at the Political Science Department. So this is my great pleasure to speak and share some of my thoughts today. But what I'm going to speak on is just 3 points. But I believe, some of the points I will make might be contradict to your original thoughts. But let me, analyze the trilateral situations, Japan, China, U.S. situation like this way. So first of all, this is, I think, kind of common sense, or maybe you hear it, especially from our diplomat and government officials every day. That is, for Japan and some of Asian nations, China poses a lot of challenges, security challenges, economic challenges, business challenges, as well as opportunities. Yeah. But secondly, I want to emphasize now United States and Donald Trump administration is opposing a competitive strategy or competitive approach toward China. And that is totally opposite and big shift from U.S.-China policy last 40 years. That is main focus was engagement and partnership. So if the point one is really strong, I mean, like for Japan, China is really existential security threats and economic threats. I believe, such American, kind of competitive approach, or like a boxing approach, should be really welcomed in Japan or in Asia. But I will describe that is not the case. So why? This is the second question. But, without thinking or without addressing the second questions, we cannot understand why Japanese government and society, especially government, is now so excited to welcome Mr. Xi Jinping in this spring. Right? And third, so this is kind of fun, a bit fun intellectually. So I want to propose just 2x2 slides, 2x2 figure that might be very provocative for your thoughts. But I want to address this question. So what kind of strategies each nation in Asia, especially Japan, will take in the future? And how Asian order will look like in the future? Asian order. Now, of course, after 1945, that is totally U.S.-led order, right? Or enlargement of U.S.-led order, spreading all over the Asia. But that kind of Asian order is now with big stress, big challenges. So I want to describe that in the last few minutes. Let me begin about the number one, point one, for Japan, China both challenges as well as opportunities. If you want to know about the Japanese government defense policy, this is a really good document, NDPZ. This is just military acronym. I think US military also have a lot of acronym, but we also have a lot of acronym. NDPZ is National Defense Program Guideline. It is just to talk about how we spend our defense budget, right? That is equivalent, almost equivalent to national military strategy of the United States. So in the United States, under national security strategy, you have national military strategy and defense budget. And same to us. We have national security strategy, which is very uninteresting. But on the second layer, we have a National Defense Program Guideline. This is really good documents to read. And the government published NDPZ almost 1 year ago, 2018 December, so 13 months ago. And it begins from this key regional assessment. I don't want to read out, but you can look at the sentence in the red. So it says, we have a lot of challenges surrounding Japan. And that challenge is not, kind of traditional warfare, but we have a lot of challenges in security realm, right? Or even in political sphere, It says foreign countries' public opinion manipulation through social network, SNS. That is also concerns, So I don't think, you find out big gap between US and Japan or between Japan and NATO, by this assessment. And even on China, I think this is also very identical to many American governmental documentations. Again, I don't want to read out, but please look at some sentence and vocabulary in that. So it says like a cyber, electromagnetic domain, space domain, missile defense penetration capabilities, And also it says, we have a big concerns on China's way of civil-military integration policy. Or sometimes in English, you say civil-military fusion policy in the area of science and technology. My point is very clear. So if we only look at these government documentation, Japan has a big worries about rising Chinese military capabilities, right? And that is really close to American military documents. This is my point. And this kind of slide is also should be very familiar if you ever participated any talk by Japanese government official. This one is Chinese government ships activities surrounding Senkaku Islands, which Chinese government say Diaoyu Islands. So, from 2012, we see so many, Chinese government ships activities in Japanese, area. But, that area, China claimed their own sovereignty. Right? So this is another kind of evidence Japan should feel a big stress or security threat from mainland China. And another good evidence is Japan's defense budget has been increasing. Yeah, this is good evidence, right? So actually, Japan has decreased its defense budget from 1990s, actually from 1996 and 7. But the Shinzo Abe administration, now he is enjoying his 7th year, I believe. Now going to 8th year. But after taking office, he started to increase defense budget very gradually. But the important thing is, the trend has been changed, right? So this is another good evidence Japan felt big challenges from China. And Japanese people don't like Chinese and China, right? according to public poll, right? But please be careful. This is governmental public poll, and it says affinity toward China, not Chinese, but to PRC, People's Republic of China. Only 20% of people have positive feeling, and many people still keeps very big negative feeling. So this is just my first point. Not only China poses big business opportunities, but China, as a neighbor of Japan, posing a lot of security concerns, security challenges on Japan's homeland. And I believe many people might support that view, right? And defense budget has been has been increased. Oh, it's a kind of security dilemma, you want to say. So this is my first point, right? But from here is my real point I want to make today. So is Japan sharing US concerns on Chinese challenges? Or are they really welcoming Donald Trump China approach, very tough China approach? Not only trade war, but in Washington, many government authorities start to have a lot of regulations over China, or trade with China, or like an exchange of scientists and engineers with China, right? So all set of kind of anti-China policies are welcomed by Japanese government? My answer is no. Of course, they may not say so in public, but but when we look at the detail, what they're doing, Japanese government is doing is totally opposite to, American approach toward China. This is a really good example of top government official speech. I have two American people's speech at the top. One is Marshall Pottinger. He's our good friend, actually. But he's now working at National Security Council in White House. But the second one is Vice President Mike Pence from Indiana. Second one is really famous speech. And that was done in the fall of 2018, so 1.5 years ago. But this is really good speech. I really encourage you to take a look at the videotape of this. He delivered 40-minute speech, and within 40 minutes, 35 minutes, he simply criticized China from all angles, right? It was just bashing China, without any policy alternatives, right? Last 5 minutes, he proposed some idea, but it was so short list, We are really surprised, right? So that is kind of reflection of American government's, Trump administration's kind of hostility or hostile attitude toward China, right? And here it says, this is just a citation from Mike Pence. He said, Beijing is employing an all-of-government approach using political, economic, and military tools, as well as propaganda, to advance its influence and benefit its interest in the United States. He also criticized Chinese cyber espionage and technology espionage, right? Industrial espionage, And also he criticized Chinese government activities against Taiwan, against Pacific Islands, against South American countries, right? So, he criticized a lot of Chinese activities. Again, it was 4th of October 2018 at Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. 3 weeks after, from that speech, 26th of October 2018, so same year, same month, Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, visited Beijing. And what he said there, actually, this is what he tweeted after his meeting with Xi Jinping and Li Ka-ching, is like this. This is same, but this is his tweet. Actually, this tweet was really shocking to our State Department people, because he didn't get any approval from State Department of Japan, and he tweeted, suddenly, but he was so excited. So it means he was excited. But finally, the MOFA, Japan State Department, accepted this was true. At least Shinzo Abe said this. So the next year's diet speech, in the diet in January, we have policy speech. And the same thing was repeated. So this is kind of what Japan's government have confirmed as a substance of Xi Jinping Abe Shinzo talk in October 2018. But anyway, so what Abe emphasized is from here, upon international standard. Oh, sorry, this is direct translation from Japanese to English, so it might not make good sense in English, but just to give you some kind of sense, or fever, right, of Prime Minister, I want to share the direct translation from Japanese. Upon international standard, from competition to cooperation, as neighbors, avoid becoming threats on each other, then promote free and fair global trade regime. So, okay, your ally, Vice President, say totally different things, and American government emphasize we are now giving up engagement. We are now going to competition against China. And Japan always said cornerstone of U.S. strategy in Asia. But that prime minister, not a weak prime minister, very strong prime minister, said in Beijing, we want to cooperate with you, China. Right? So this is kind of big, this is a good evidence of the gap between Japan and United States over China. Right? In fact, even before this Abe tweet of October 2018, Japan and China have approached to each other. It started from 2017, and it is a kind of 2 years, kind of rapprochement between Japan and China. I listed up many events, but the point is a lot of exchange of high-level, government officials, prime minister, foreign minister, and other people. It begins with the party secretary general's visit to Beijing in the spring of 2017, just after Trump became president of the United States. Mr. Nikai, he is number 2 in the party, ruling party, visited Beijing and met with Xi Jinping. That time, Xi Jinping hosted Belt and Road Initiative Summit. It was his project, Xi Jinping's project. So he really wanted to get representation from Japan, and he sent a letter of invitation. But, actually, Japanese and Chinese relationship until 2017 has not been so good, right? Because, as you may remember, 2010 and 2012, Japan and China had 2 big incidents over Senkaku Islands, right? Disputed islands. If I'm official from government, I have to say there is no dispute over Senkaku. But we have dispute, right? At least we have dispute as a phenomena, right? It is true. But after that, these 2 big events, Japan and China didn't have good relationship, right? But when China, Xi Jinping hosted APEC meeting, right, in 2014, they had to meet. Xi Jinping had to welcome Mr. Abe because Abe has a right to participate multilateral forum, right, like APEC. So they met each other, but it was like this, right? So I really love this photo, but also I really love expression from former American government official to describe this photo. What he said is, two leaders looks like smelling other people's socks, right? So I think that is true. So even 2014, they didn't go well, right? But around 2017, both two countries approached very strongly to each other. And, Mr. Xi and Mr. Abe met again in that year. And they finally look like this. I am Asian and Japanese, so I can say this is Asian smile, right? I think this is not smile, right? And this is Asian smile. I think for many American people, this might not look like a good smile, but this is kind of maximum, right, of the smile, right? And actually, I have another photo. This is this year. Sorry, last year. So almost no change, right? So this is the reality of two government relationships. So after having two big incidents over Senkaku, disputed islands, right? They finally tried to fix their relationship around 2014, and they did it, but it was very half-finished. But last 2 years, everything is so different, right? Even number two in the party, ruling party, Mr. Nikai visited, Beijing. Actually, for Chinese people, party is really important, and Japan dispatched the number two in the party. So it means a lot to Chinese Communist Party. And even after that, they, really succeeded in fixing their relationship. And now Japanese government is waiting, looking forward Mr. Xi Jinping's visit in the spring. So what happens and why has Japan been so excited about China and its relationship with China? Or why Chinese leadership also excited about its bilateral relationship with China, with Japan? To explain about that, I think first of all about China. Why has Communist Party of China been so excited? This is a good analysis from Professor Shin Kawashima, my colleague at University of Tokyo. And what he said is China wanted to make kind of coalition to push back against the United States. Right? That might be true. Yes, 2 years ago, that was China who approached first to Japan. Right? They are so energetic. We have a lot of meeting, minister level meeting, but even before that, we have vice minister meeting of foreign affairs. And Chinese diplomat first pitch a ball. Their face really look different in the spring of 2017. And then, Japanese government accepted that offer from China. So, but everything started from the new Chinese approach toward Japan. So maybe Chinese top leaders really want to have Japan as a kind of hedging against very uncertain Trump administration. But Japan, accepted that offer. Why? This is the very important point, for me. And we have a lot of analysis and hypothesis to explain about that. One very good factor to explain why Japan is so excited about its relationship with China and is reluctant to join kind of coalitions against China with the United States is economy. This is, sorry, I forgot to put some English here, but it says Japan's trade with China and also with the United States. The column in blue is sky blue is Japan's trade with United States. And in that is Japan trade with China. So, and the top is the amount of trade, and the bottom is the percentage of the trade in Japan's, the all trade volume. But the point is, from about 15 years ago, China is largest trade partner for Japan, surpassing United States. Right? But this is just one aspect of, kind of dependence between Japan and China. In reality, Japan's business model, I think we have a lot of specialists on Japan's business model here, but Japan's business model is something cannot be sustained without China. Because many Japanese companies just creating intermediate goods, right? Very important parts or some very important materials to finalize the production line, including like a semiconductor tip or other very important chemicals. So Japan cannot, how can I say, complete its business model or economy model without China. So this is the slide from government white paper on trade. So very difficult to read, I know. But this is just a kind of stat number of the trade. But you can find out, like here, Japan and China, China got a lot of procurement from Japan. I mean, they have to export from Japan, but most of the item is not final products, right? Intermediate goods. Of course, Japan sold a lot of things to North America, but this is, final products like automobile, like oat and other things. We have many, chart like this, but if you have any interest, I want you to look at Japan's Ministry of Trade and Industry, and they can offer you a lot of these crazy mapping. But the point is, Japan. One of the reasons why Japan have to fix its relationship with China is really economical, right? And business oriented. But the second reason is, of course, business and economy is a kind of background reason. But Japanese, policy makers and opinion leaders, most of them really don't want to see rivalry in Asia because Japan is living in Asia. So this is a quotation from Aki Tanaka, president of GRIPS National University for Public Policy Studies. And he was also president of JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. He is actually top and most famous international politics scholars in Japan. But what he said here is, really interesting. New Cold War, he said, shouldn't be transformed into a hot war, and Japan should make efforts not only for strengthening the alliance with the United States for deterrence, but also for enlarging a sphere for peaceful coexistence with China. I think he is now not in the government, so he can say what he wants to say. But this is really interesting thinking, right? Way of thinking, and totally opposite to Washington strategist, I believe. But this is the quotation from our top scholars and practitioners on international affairs. And he continued, Japan shouldn't give up shaping a China model of development and political reforms in the future. He still keeps his hope to shape China. Right? That is something United States government is now denying so strongly. We are betrayed last 30 years. It was kind of illusion or fallacy. Many people say so in Washington, D.C. But Aki Tanaka say, we still keep our hope to shape Chinese future. And actually, some of government agencies in Japan propose a kind of similar ideas, like Ministry of Trade Industry, or the ministry who created these kind of maps, figures. What they are now saying is Japan should take a foreign policy as to build a bridge between United States and China. Building a bridge by rule making. Okay, this is the first time I hear in the post-war Japan's foreign policy history, Japan want to be a bridge between two superpowers. Okay, yeah, that is, of course, this is just a statement within policy circle. They never say so in the public, or they try not to say to stimulate Japanese public, right? But in government documentation, we use that. They use that word. So this is a huge, kind of, big leap from, a kind of national security oriented or national security ideas, right? Of course, in Japan, we still have a lot of national security folks, right, who dearly enjoy Trump China policy, right? They believe, they have to stop Chinese growth, right? So United States finally realized the problem. It should be welcome. That is, national security folk people, national security concerned people in Japan say. But what I want to say is, they are not. These, national security oriented people is not the only people in policy making. And in reality, there are so many voices, and even as a behavior, as a government, not only a prime minister, but also other ministers and government agencies start to work very hard to fix their relationship with China. So sorry, this slide is have too many sentences, so just skim, please skim. But so my point is, Japan's vision is, they try to keep Asia as kind of inclusive Asia. Don't want to have a strong rivalry in the region. First of all, it might destroy kind of, global value chain, GBC, we start to say, global value chain in Asia, or international interdependence in Asia. So that is, Japan's hope. Don't to crash, destroy such, globalized Asia or interdependence in Asia. But secondly, they hope, if exclusive Asian order created, that might end up giving more security challenges on Japan's homeland. Stabilize the relationship with China might be very beneficial, might be very good for Japan's security. So, but for these people, American approach looks too exclusive. Right? Inclusive versus exclusive. And I think you may hear about the free and open Indo-Pacific vision or strategy from the government speech or government documents, sometime. But it was still the concept of Japan's foreign policy, free and open Indo-Pacific, FOIP, we say. And now United States government also start to say free and open Indo-Pacific. So what is a region? Indo-Pacific, that is kind of connection of West Pacific and Indian Ocean. So you can look at this map, Indian Ocean and West Pacific. is the Indo-Pacific. And Japanese government say that area should be free and open. Yes, I mean, they still keep this as kind of bumper sticker, right? And this is still a very important concept in Japan's foreign policy. But this concept was misunderstood for many months because this concept was regarded kind of containment strategy against China, right? Maybe for some people in the government, especially in the very beginning, they really want to have kind of containment against China with the United States. They are national security people, right? But in practice, last 2 years, most foreign policy makers use this free and open Indo-Pacific as a strategy or tools, foreign policy tools, to engage with China or Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, right? And they say, by this concept, they want to shape Chinese way of conducting their international development towards a better way. So, many of the policy or concept has been, of Japan has been regarded as very hawkish. And some hawkish people in the government say, they feel very big threat from China. So, in international kind of sphere, many people regard Japan as the most hawkish Asian nations against China, rise of China. But at least for me, as analyst, maybe you are now, understanding I never come from the government, right? But as an analyst, last 2 years, what Japanese government has been doing is really opposite to such a common sense or common views, right? Common view is really strong, about Japan's foreign policy. It says, Japan's foreign policy is now going to be very hawkish against China, encircling China, and very nationalistic, ultra-nationalistic against China, South Korea. This kind of discourse has been very popular. I don't deny such a nationalistic things, right? Yes, yeah, some nationalistic voice has been still strong in the ruling party, MP, and also in society. But I think, in practice of foreign policy, the last 2 years, we start to see the totally opposite things against such a common sense or common view in the media. So this is my second take. Lastly, I only have 5 minutes or so, but just let me explain about this slide. I only have one slide, so don't be so panicked. This is my last slide, right? So finally, I want to predict, or I want to propose my own prediction or scenario of future Asian order. The precondition is rise of China has been continued, right? And China fails to build a mechanism to avoid a security dilemma. This is strong precondition, but please regard this first of all. Accept this precondition first of all. But I think many people expect or had a kind of original ideas of Asian order as this one, enhanced San Francisco system. San Francisco system is, according to Kent Calder, who described this idea 20 years ago, is in Asia, United States has been taking a leadership and has a many bilateral alliance. And Japan got somehow the best position among US allies and friends. And Japan and other Asian countries have access to American market. So that is, San Francisco system. And, if we take that rhetoric if United States commitment to Asia is stable and strong, and US is really reliable, and against the rise of China, other powers like Japan, Australia, India, ASEAN, Southeast Asia, are really, I can say, determined to catch up or balance against China. So at the top right, San Francisco system might be enhanced against China. So that is kind of coalition of allies, right? Like United States, Japan, Australia, Philippines, say other countries like India, Indonesia, these countries, right? And Singapore, very important. They will team up against rising Chinese capabilities, especially military capabilities. So this is, maybe best scenario for national security folk in both countries. And that is, in academic terms, it is balancing against China. But for me, we are now going to different directions, or at least we have to expect, we have to prepare ourselves with different scenario. What kind of scenario we have to think? First of all, this one. If United States commit to Asia still very strongly, but lesser powers, Japan, Australia, and others, is not teaming up with United States. This is something what we start to see, right? Take an example of ITCS. ITC is a telecommunication and service, like a Huawei and other, stuff. Japan is still not so bad from America's perspective, but look like, other Asian nations or UK, Germany, they are starting to say the different things to the United States government, right? About the Huawei, Japan is not so bad from Washington perspective, but in other spectrum, other sphere, as I described already, Japan start to take different China policy, right? So because they really know, lesser powers really know, they have to depend on rising Chinese economic power. Not depend, maybe, interact, maybe, at least, with the Chinese market and Chinese production. They actually put a lot of sunk cost already, right? But they really want to depend on US for security, right? So if US will stay in the Asia, that is the best scenario for lesser powers, right? So this is world of free riders, right? For US perspective, they are free riding to US security power, but that is best scenario, right? They can enjoy their interaction with Chinese economy. In academic sense, it is backpassing, right? Backpassing their own responsibility to others, right? This is a very classic, phrase from international relation theory. But backpassing might be a very feasible scenario of Asia. But of course, if lesser powers keep this strategy, US may think again, why do we have to provide only security and lose our economic interest? Okay, we have to retrench ourselves from Asia. Yeah, and then, other, lesser powers may think, okay, now we cannot rely on United States. US is not reliable. That is downward spiral, right? So I think world of free riders cannot be sustained for a long time, but that is one scenario we should expect. Or if US commitment or reliability, credibility is lost, we have to think about this left column, scenario on the left. Top left is, even though United States is not credible or reliable, or United States is really withdrawing its forward presence military force from Asia. But lesser powers like Japan, Australia, ASEAN, India, they have some border problems, so they may want to catch up and balance against China and want to team up without United States. That scenario could happen. That is local coalition against China without United States. That is, I name it as local balancing. To the contrast of global balancing, Asian nation does not have United States, and they have to team up against rising Chinese capabilities. For me, this scenario is really difficult because they have to team up without United States. Maybe they don't have, in that world, they don't have any leader, right? Japan will be leader? I don't think so. And more importantly, India might not join that coalition, right? Without India, actually, even Japan, Australia, and ASEAN team up. They cannot create enough balancing against China. We calculated, we project again and again the accumulation of power in our project, but without India, it is super difficult for them to team up, even though Japan, Australia might want to increase their defense budget 5 times or so. They cannot catch up with China. And India does not have big interest on such a coalition. They may want to focus more on their domestic problems and stability with China. So this scenario might not be so probable, but we can think that possibility at least. And final scenario is sinicization or Sinocentric order in Asia. If US retreating from Asia or US is not reliable enough, and also lesser powers of Asia cannot have kind of confidence in teaming up against China, they may simply accept Sinocentric order in Asia. That is bandwagoning to China if we employ academic concept. We are now, having these 4 scenarios, right? If we only look at, kind of common perspective, we only look at this global balancing against China. But as I said, no, actually the reality go different direction, right? Of course, if the threat from China, rising China, has been so strong, Japan, Australia, ASEAN may sacrifice their economic dependence or interdependence with China. And they simply go to global balancing against China. Yeah, I cannot deny that option. But, if that might not happen, the kind of confrontation with China, US-China confrontation or competition is more kind of gradual process. Many Asian nations may not want to join that, may simply want to enjoy their economic luxury. So they may want to go this one, or US is retreating. If US is retreating, they may go Sinocentric order. But I think this is just an intellectual exercise, but we have to prepare ourselves with this kind of scenario. So thank you very much for listening very carefully. But my talk is very simple, as this is my first slide. So, but may be what I say, it might be contradict your original ideas about Japan's foreign policy and Asian order now and in the future. Again, thank you very much for listening. We have some time for Q&A, so please raise your hand.
Please. Thank you very much. recently there have been high tensions between South Korea and Japan,
Oh, yeah.
especially in trade. Do you think some of Japan's willingness to work with China is out of sort of a fear of falling out of economic importance and becoming a minor player in the game?
Thank you for that question. And for me, Japan-South Korea relationship is totally, different context, right? I always signed, that is really disappointing, right? Because, if we look at the big picture, first of all, South Korean company and Japanese company and Chinese companies and US companies, we are all in the same global value chain, right? But Japanese government employ its own economic statecraft against South Korea by the reason they say they don't have confidence on South Korea's diplomacy, right? So it is, of course, it might be true. South Korea may not have good export control authorities. They are understaffed, right? So there is a reason South Japanese government have something to say to South Korea. Like South Korea, you have to fix your export control regimes and like that. But what Japanese government did is, did list South Korean companies from the white list. I mean, export control good list, good people's list. And they started a kind of very nationalistic diplomatic game, right? But from the angle of big picture, I think Japan and South Korea should have the same interest, right, in keeping the global value chain and also to keep inclusive order making in Asia. So again, this is the big disappointment for me. They started such a diplomatic game led by nationalism, right? Yeah. That is kind of answer to your question.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have a nationalism-related question, maybe two questions. One is, can you give us a sense of the balance in voices, national, like policy voices, between the pro-military, anti-China, what you mostly hear about the Abe administration, and what you're indicating is counterintuitive here? What is the percentage, say, strength in terms of influence on the government? And the other is that how will this actually work potentially? So Abe is in power until 2021, and then thereafter, how do you think things might actually transpire in a practical way?
Thank you. Excellent question again. First of all, so pro-military or militaristic, ideas. I don't know about the percentage. It is always very difficult to count the number. But they are still strong, right? Like not only MOD, Ministry of Defense, but also Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like a State Department in United States. But our MOFA is actually more national security oriented. So and they really believe Japan and SDF, self-defensive forces, have to prepare more against the threat or potential threat from rising Chinese capabilities including new domain, cyber, space and electromagnetic area, right? So I believe, they are still kind of majority voice, at least in public sphere. They are super majority, right? But, if we only look at them, we cannot explain why Japan-China relationship is being fixed. Or sometimes, politicians, even very high-rank politicians, have a really big expectation on their relationship with China. So it is always very difficult what they really think inside. But don't take me wrong. I think for Japan, the alliance with United States is still the best option, right? And of foreign policy, and that is kind of consensus even among Asian hands. I mean, the people who want to fix the relationship with China. The alliance with United States is still the best option for them because it is cost effective, and and Japan and United States has integrated their military policy already last 70 years. So, that is really good asset for them. But for some people, but that is not small people, but not majority, but increasing, strengthening a camp, want to emphasize that Asians order, inclusive Asian order. Right? And maybe that is partly reflection of the idea neighborhood should be stabilized. That is the area we live. Right? And United States is not living. Right? So we want to employ US power, but we are living here. So we have to stabilize the relationship with China and other countries, even with North Korea. That might be the idea. Yeah. So, and secondly, maybe that is kind of reflections of frustrations against Trump administration's America First approach. Right? So, look, just remember Abe's tweet. Right? Finally, he said, promote trade regime, free and fair trade regime. That is, totally, really good message against America First, foreign policy, right? If, he is really strong believer of Trump administration, he has to say free, fair, and reciprocal trade regime, actually. But, Abe didn't tweet like that, right? So I think, frustration against America First is also kind of excuse for Japan, Japan policymaker, to pursue their bilateral relationship with China. So, okay. Finally, beyond Abe, you say. So beyond Abe, just briefly, maybe the same, maybe same direction. Yeah, I think Abe is, of course, more nationalistic than any other potential leaders, right? But he still do this kind of things. So this is more structure. So I don't think, big change might happen, right? Yeah.
I actually have a question, but I'm going to ask it in Japanese first to see if I can try. I'm practicing. So, Sahashi sensei wa Abe no tweet o Nihongo de yonde itadakimasen ka? Could you please read Abe's tweet in Japanese?
I'm not Abe.
I know you're not, but could you?
国際スタンダードの上に競争から協調へ、隣国同士として互いに脅威とならない、そして自由で公正な貿易体制を発展させていく。Yes.
ありがとうございます。I need the practice. Kanji's hard.
So my question is, you talked about how Japan is getting more dependent on selling components to China.
Mm-hmm.
But for that market to grow, U.S. needs to keep buying goods from China, right? Because now U.S. is exporting all these finished products from.
Yeah.
So, but I don't see that sort of balancing act playing out. And then is Japanese government thinking about any way to, improve relationship between China and U.S. so they would, the trade would increase more?
Yeah. I got your point. It's a really excellent point because, if U.S. May not want to use made in China products, like in ITC, maybe Japanese companies cannot sustain their business with China. Yeah, that's true, right? So, maybe Japanese government and companies want to see the redux of U.S.-China relationship in that sense. But at the same time, the products now made in China, but supported by Japanese and South Korean, Taiwanese, and other Asian countries, intermediate goods, it's not only for American market, right? It's for European market. It's for emerging market in all over the world. So that is a big fear now in the among Japanese companies. We simply lost the opportunities, right? We cannot survive only with U.S. market, but U.S. market is really important, as you know. Last lot of decades for Japanese company, but beyond U.S. North American market, they really want to sell their final products, right? So I think no, now like in Washington, they use the word like a partial disengagement or targeted decoupling. These words like decoupling, disengagement is never favored or taken positively in Japan among at least government business-oriented people. So two different market is awful. I mean, very bad scenario. So they may want to have the same single market in the world.
Thanks for the talk, and I'm glad to see you again after a while. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the scale of the time you are thinking about when talking about this possible scenarios. It's 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or so. And the related question is that how would you think about the implications of shrinking and aging population of China to those scenarios?
Thank you, very good question, and I'm very happy to see your face here. And I believe you settled here very well. So, actually, we studied together in University of Tokyo. So, anyway, so first of all, about the time range of this 2x2. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't know. I don't know, but that is not like just within 2 or 3 years, right? Order transformation took more years, right? But order transformation of order, it's something like when we look back, it changed, right? I mean, it changed very radically. But during the process, it is very difficult to realize that is transformed, right? But so I have no answer, I mean, exact number, how long it takes to see this kind of order transformation. But for me, it is not so long, like 10 years or so, right? 10 years might be very enough. Or some people start to say, another 4 years of your presidency, 45, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, might change allies and friends' behavior so much. So maybe next 5 years or so, we can see the big shift, right? But it might be safer to say 10 years, more than 10 years. We wait and see that big change of order in Asia. And second, demography, the challenge on Chinese economy by the shrinking demography, I mean, shrinking population. Of course, and not only demography, but also we can expect a kind of big stop, I mean, kind of the stop of Chinese growth, right, in coming years. So if that happens, we have to think a totally different scenario. But that might be very close to this original world, I mean, status quo, if America still commit to Asia and China stop its growth. Maybe what we see is, another post-war order, right? But if China has been stopped, Chinese growth has been stopped, but U.S. also not so well reliable, or U.S. retreat from this region. That is very different, world. Very interesting multipolar Asia without strong leadership, without strong threat. That is, very interesting world. And, the question is, they really can make some order, right? I didn't provide the definition of order, but, like a pattern of behavior is really important part of the order. So each nation want to achieve the same goals and same values. And for that sake, they want to keep the same patterns of behavior. Then order has been created. But if we think about such multipolar, without strong leadership of the United States, without strong China, that is, very chaotic order, or simply we can say it's kind of, zero leadership order. Right? So I think that is really interesting future. But, if U.S. is still, there in Asia, that is just a repeat of post-war order, I believe. So.
Thank you, Sahashi-san. The Abe tweet drew a lot of attention here, and it's interesting to note that he went rogue and did that tweet without approval of MOFA. That's very similar to how President Trump tweets, and I'm wondering where Abe got that idea. But that's beside the point. Can you go back to the full scenario thing? And I had a couple of questions about this. One is U.S. commitment and reliability. So there are different dimensions to this, right? So the commitment to engaging or countering China specifically, that's one thing, and I think you're referring to this. But there's another dimension, which is to commit to the region and build sort of multilateral cooperative mechanism. And on the first one, countering China, Trump administration seems to be more committed. But the second one, building multilateral infrastructure, right? Trump administration is not particularly good at that. So I'm wondering if you could speak to those two different dimensions and which, how that they might relate to each other. The second question is, when you look at this, there are different players, and let's put aside other, like ASEAN and Korea and other countries, and focus on US, China, and Japan here. And China's approach, the direction of its foreign policy, seems stable. It will be, I can see if you look at 10 years down the line, Xi Jinping is probably still the president, and China's policy of expanding in Asia to Pacific to India to Africa to Europe, that's probably not going to change too much. The United States, it'll be very different depending on who the next president is, right? So that's really interesting, and we don't really know what to expect, but I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And also Japan, related to Levy's question, in introducing you, I should have also mentioned that not only is he an expert on international relations, but he's also an expert on Japanese politics, domestic politics and leadership issues. He probably knows who the next prime minister is going to be after Abe. So if you could speak to, depending on who the next prime minister might be, whether it's Ishiba or Suga or Kishida or Kono or Koizumi, how that things might play out depending on who the next prime minister is.
Second question is really tough as long as this conversation is recorded. But the first one is a commitment and reliability, and it is, Kyo, your point is really excellent because, yes, when we talk about the U.S. commitment to Asia, we always have two dimensions, we think. That is, first one is military, balancing against China. So for that, we think about U.S. forces on Japan, U.S. forces on Guam, U.S. forces on South Korea, and how U.S. will keep very robust military capabilities against rising Chinese capability in all dimensions. But the second aspect of commitment is more diplomatic, right? Like a U.S. commitment to TPP or East Asia Summit, or ASEAN Regional Forum, other multilateral forum. Yes, I think but it is very difficult to separate two issues because for many Asian nations, not only Japan but also ASEAN, they really want to see not only military but diplomatic commitment from United States, and for them it is difficult to separate these two, right? Like when we look at if United States only committing to multilateralism without strong military forward presence, that is really half-finished, job by the U.S., and they cannot, rely on United States commitment. But the same thing can be said for the opposite, right? U.S. is employing, keeping a lot of military capability in Asia, but don't spend big diplomatic resources for multilateralism, like now. It is also regarded as not strong commitment. So I think both is integrated so much, so it is difficult to separate these two, right? So for Asian nations, I think they really want to see both has been well integrated and that will give them kind of assurance. But it is very interesting point. So thank you very much for that. And second one is, you are right. I mean, Chinese leadership has been very stable, and foreign policy also has been stable. But yeah, but just one footnote is, last 5 years, Chinese foreign policy and domestic policy leadership has been something defined, something upstage or next stage, right? I mean, what China has been done in South China Sea, or what China has been done in domestic politics is not like under Hu Jintao, right? So we have to think about, even Chinese, leadership change as a kind of turning point or tipping point to explain about Chinese behavior. But, the good thing for them is the tenure is longer than others, and that is more stable. And United States, yes, leadership totally changed the shape of, foreign policy. Right? So, as an analyst, we always think about the possibilities and scenario of the potential democratic, administrations, and what kind of change we can expect from that, or what kind of things might be even, under some democratic candidates, maybe United States really want to keep competitive strategy policy against China. So that is our big research interest nowadays. But your question is about Japan. Yes, I don't know who will. Maybe another Abe administration might come back, right? Strong rumor says Abe may want to stay one more year after 2021, right? Not 3 years, but 1 year more, right? Like Nakasone in 1980s. So, we really don't know what kind of discussion Abe want to have, and also LDP, ruling party, want to have. But important thing is, there is no other alternative in terms of winning election. I think because in Japan, we have single seat constituency, single seat election system in lower house. Of course, we have also proportionate, but we have combination. But, to win in the single seat election, single seat constituency, they really need faith, strong faith. And you pick up a lot of names, like Kishida, Ishiba, and other, Japanese famous politicians, or Motegi, now foreign minister. Do you believe, they can be really good replacement for Abe's popularity in Tokyo or beyond Tokyo? I really don't think so, right? So that is the reason I still believe, Abe may be favored by the party logic. They want to keep their majority. So they cannot change prime minister so easily. But if Abe will not be, or will simply retire by the year 2021, according to in-house rules of LDP, we have a lot of choice, like Kishida, a former foreign minister, or now defense minister Kono, or Mr. Ishiba, who is actually most popular among Japanese people. I don't know, so I cannot say about any probability. So that is not my job. But what kind of foreign policy they may want to choose if they are elected as prime minister? For me, not so big change. As I said, as a response to other people's question. This is more structure. Right? If Japan cannot believe U.S. power, or if Japan simply want to, keep their interdependence with Chinese market and want to stabilize the neighborhood relationship, I think next prime minister do the same thing. So, and this is not good or bad things, but at least new prime ministers, we have a lot of lists, right, 5 or 6 or 7, but most of them are not so interested in provoking the bilateral relationship with China by historical problem, right? So I think what they will do is simply decided by structure. So very close to what we are now seeing. So.
I actually have a two-finger question on your last point you just made. So we always hear like shared values and norms between Japan and the U.S. and other Western countries, but you didn't talk about that at all. And so I'm wondering if there is anything more than rhetoric about that, or is it something? In foreign policy.
Yeah, thank you very much for raising that point. And I intentionally don't use the word value or universal value, or because that is that might lead us to the other discussion. But I think it was better. It might have been better to speak more about that. So, but I think Japan is still a strong believer of universal value and promotion of like a free trade, human rights, democracy, right? From that angle, they really don't believe what's happening now in China, especially in terms of human rights and democratization. But the point I wanted to make is still they believe, policymakers want to believe, that should be done proportionally or gradually by having or keeping engagement with Chinese, country, with PRC. The approach, the different approach is, just simply give up, PRC, communist regime cannot be changed or shaped from outside. So we simply cut down a relationship. So to keep our commitment to the value. That is, different way. But I think, what they are now thinking is still keep some hope for the future change, right? Especially, free trade and other economic practice. So you can say, even now, so many people like Uyghur and Tibet and, Hong Kong, they are suffering from lack of human rights protection, right? And religious freedom is lost, right? It is true. I personally, as a student, I really have big frustration on that. But as a Japan's foreign policy, I think for their approach is kind of more modest on that. They may want to see progress of these political values in the future, liberal values in the future. But they believe, their approach should be more modest and gradual. Right? So we can say this is really close to America's engagement ideas in 1990s to 2000. Right? So Japan government is still using the word actually engagement with China by this reason. And US government and many people in Washington simply stop to using the word engagement and partnership because they don't keep hope for the change of China in this sense. But I think Japanese government foreign policy is, still keeping, as I said, hope for the future change. They might be wrong, but that might be, kind of foreign policy non-superpower can take. So.
Final question? Do you? Okay. quickly.
Sahashi, thank you very much for the wonderful lecture. I have a quick question regarding the current ongoing widespreading new virus that started in Wuhan and spreading throughout China. What do you think will be the short term or within the coming 6 years, will be the change or impact on that, the political and economic landscape between China and Japan?
So I couldn't catch the first sentence. So can you repeat the first sentence?
The new virus that's spreading out in China, what do you think will be the impact on the political and economical landscape, China and Japan?
I really have big worries about now virus in China, in the central China, central West China, Wuhan. But I believe, I'm very layman about, such a public health issue. But I believe, what Chinese government is now doing is, not so bad. I mean, of course, their first action was really late. But what they're doing now is actually not actually any other country also do, in that kind of situation. So, and that is not their wrong, right? Of course, first action was slow, so they have to fix that. But this is more functional issue, right? And combating against a virus and any other infectious disease is kind of global challenge. Not only as you say, the virus now in China, but also we have like HIV and other malaria, right? For these things, the things China, Japan, and United States should work together. So I really don't think that things, the phenomena now happening in Wuhan or in the nearby cities change the discourse or policies of Japan toward China. Maybe, Japanese government and society want to help them, right? So that might not stop the relationship, I believe. So.
Join me in thanking Professor Sahashi for the wonderful lecture.